Hello and welcome back to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video I'll be concentrating on the theme of jealousy across the tragic play Othello by William Shakespeare. Jealousy is a consuming and toxic emotion that is associated with both barbaric imagery and action across this play. It destroys relationships that are both professional, personal, and the notion of honour. Jealousy humiliates Othello, a respected soldier who ends up killing his wife over a handkerchief, which in itself is a symbol of honour. We are definitely not meant to view Othello as naturally jealous, yet he becomes consumed and absorbed in that world of jealousy and the green-eyed monster. Male protagonists, both Othello and the antagonist himself, Iago, are violent in their intentions to torture anyone who they perceive as wronging them. Iago begins at the start of the play with professional resentment and envy at Cassio, who's been promoted over him due to his status. And Iago seeks to destroy both Othello and Cassio's professional reputations. Now, across this play, there are several claims of sexual jealousy that remain unfounded. Both Bianca, Othello, and Iago all believe they've been betrayed by their loved ones. Yet it is Iago's jealousy that fuels his villainy further. He believes that Othello hath done his office. Whilst the same is true of Bianca and Othello believing that their lovers have sinned against them, they both seem genuinely saddened that their lover could choose to be unfaithful. And so in a sense, the obsession with ocular proof, no matter how redundant an idea, in a sense signals that both Bianca and Othello are more noble individuals. The irony for Bianca in particular is that she is a prostitute, and yet the idea of being unfaithful is not beyond her understanding of care. She desperately seeks for Cassio to be hers. Now, contextually, let's consider the role of jealousy. Now, the critic F.R. Leavis claims that Othello slips readily into possessive jealousy as he is self-centred. Quite bold accusations suggesting that this play and its tragic hero fuel the idea of jealousy as it is his fatal flaw. And there's not enough space for him to accept that there could be something more to the story than what he has been told. It's interesting to cross-link over to Much Ado About Nothing, where Claudio believes his fiancée Hero has cheated. His suspicions are proven as inaccurate, and they reunite with no ill will and actually end up marrying. Yet in Othello, it's very clear that our protagonist's fatal flaw is his inability to discern the accusation set before him and what the reality is. And so in a sense, jealousy is our way to understanding that our man Othello cannot handle accusation and what that does to him. So let's kick off with the words of Iago, our antagonist, in Act 1, Scene 1, when he utters, "I know my price, I am worth no worse a place." So here he's referencing to status and the struggle that he views as totally unjust in his eyes, that he's been passed up from this promotion because Cassio is better connected and his status is higher. The possessive pronoun, my price, and the repetition of first person, I know, I am worth, accentuates his egocentric desires. Equally, the semantic field of value that's being employed here with worth and price amplify his resentment that class and status stops him from reaching his goals. Shakespeare shows how much jealousy affects the varying motives that Iago shares, all of which seem completely lacking in real material proof aside from this opening accusation. Now, Brabantio in Act 1, Scene 3 is very profound in his resentment when he says, "She has deceived her father and may thee." The verb deceived adds a touch of villainy to Desdemona's decision to honour her marriage for Othello publicly rather than her father. The seeds of doubt are shared, but it's almost as if these seeds of doubt that are shared here will only reap their repercussions as the play unfolds and it moves to Cyprus. The rhyme adds to his vigorous argument. He's really deploying all of his anger in that rhyme, and it unlocks what's about to follow in the plot. Perhaps Perhaps Shakespeare makes Brabantio utter these words to add to the hysteria that there would have been around their union, especially from a father figure. But it's already clear to us in Act 1, Scene 3 that Brabantio is a very paranoid father, passing on to his son-in-law paranoia, a gift that definitely keeps on giving. The jealousy might be latent in the fact that Brabantio resents that Othello has won his daughter, even though he fails to accept that. Iago has many reasons to hate Othello, and the reason verbalised in Act 2, Scene 1, that the lusty Moor hath leapt into my seat, has such strong loaded connotations of promiscuity through the adjective lusty, but it also accentuates his utter resentment as a pure motive to do wrong by Othello. The idea that Othello hath done his office and is telling her fantastical lies. In both Act 1 and Scene 2, there's evidence that this rationale for jealousy is offered. Now, this idea that Iago references these sexual deviations as truth are challenging for us. And to some extent, his nature as an antagonist, and to some extent also a kind of psychopathic character, makes us question his judgment by this point in the play. But he references again in this act wife for wife. This fixation on suspected adultery is unfounded, but it re-emerges later in our play with Othello taking such a similar fascination. I also want to draw reference to the fact that the jealousy that Iago has seems to be racially loaded as well. Lusty Moor. I feel like the idea of promiscuity being linked to the fact that he is Moorish, exotic and other, is bound in Iago's rationale. So nonetheless, jealousy is at the heart of the way that we caricature and characterise Iago and his motives. So by Act 3, Iago is very good at playing with fire, the fire of jealousy. The plot comes together in this temptation scene. Iago coming from a true position of strength when he claims, "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy, it is the green-eyed monster." And this is such false caution, the exclamation that Shakespeare notes here, and the imperative mood of "oh, beware." In essence, the connotations of the green-eyed monster, that phrasing that Shakespeare made famous, green with envy, a phrase that we use now. But Shakespeare's excellent in offering us this metaphor, because the demonisation of that emotion with its dangerous tendencies seems so true. The monstrous quality and decline in Othello's speech from this point onwards actually is reflected in the way in which jealousy permeates him. And I'm just about to unpack how that works. As we unpack the words of Othello in Act 3, Scene 3 also, we definitely sense how Iago is taking his hold. When Othello says, "some monster in thy thought too hideous to be shown," he seems both defensive and accusatory. And it definitely heightens something that Iago's speech is mirrored here. In fact, the same allusion of the monster, the green-eyed monster, is made in this language. The grotesque connotations of the noun monster, coupled with the reality that jealousy is too hideous, but we can see it happening in the words uttered from Othello from this point onwards, show the power of this emotion taking hold. We have to question why Shakespeare would employ this across the scene of the mirroring of language between Othello and Iago, and in some ways the breakdown of Othello's power as an orator in contrast to Iago, who seems to soar with verbal vivacity. Is it simply to show how much Othello has succumbed to his own fatal flaw of jealousy? Or is it to prove that our mastermind Iago deserves his place as a king of all antagonists across Shakespeare's work? The following scene after the temptation scene in Act 3, Scene 4, features Emilia talking to Desdemona, a heart-to-heart, woman to woman. And she says, "But jealous for they're jealous. It is a monster begot upon itself. born on itself. The repetition of jealous from Emilia, the voice of reason, married to such a jealous man, holds so much gravitas. It's fascinating hearing a woman talking of this emotion, equally demonising it, calling it again a monster, much like Iago and Othello the scene before. And the fact itself is repeated, mirrors the struggles of Othello with this particular emotive demon. The verbs begot and born acknowledge the chilling reality of how jealousy grows and builds in a person. It's definitely ironic, though. Shakespeare seems to be proving something to us about how this emotion will not stop. And in particular, the irony seems to be that she can't stop her husband, who seems to be ravaged by this emotion. And to some extent, I'm not convinced she's even aware of how jealous he is at this particular moment in the play. Yet the voice of reason, Emilia, having such a clear picture of the damage that can be done by jealousy, really offers for us her sharing to the very naive Desdemona what, unbeknownst to her, is about to be the motive for her death. The sheer power that Iago maintains is made even more apparent to us in Act 4, Scene 1, when he commands, as if it's an evil spirit, my medicine. He says, work on, my medicine, work. It's very villainous, that imperative call to work, as it's repeated. The alliteration proves his villainy when he says, my medicine. It's even punctuated as a clause like that. We know this is a poison. Jealousy is a poison. There's an idiom that says resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die, and it's so true. There's no healing power in this medicine. It is poisonous. Such emphatic and powerful language from Iago accentuates his control as juxtaposed with the breakdown and decline of Othello's speech. As I dig in a moment to Act 5 and the words of Othello, we realise that he cannot utter with any clarity his thoughts. Instead, he's using monosyllabic phrases that don't really make sense anymore and repeating words in a most feeble sense. Yet here, Iago stands as a man who's in control. Scary control. Evil control. But jealousy is his powerhouse. I've plucked these two pieces of evidence from Act 5 as I think they mirror beautifully the decline of Othello as jealousy takes hold, not just in his actions, but in his utterances. When he states, thy bed lust-stained shall with lust's blood be spotted, the personification of lust here, repeated, shows a bitterness and rage at the jealousy that she could have deviated sexually. But there's also a nasty bitterness in the idea of killing someone on the bed you believe they have cheated on you. The connotations of proof through stained and lust's blood, they act as a kind of metaphor for the obsessional mindset that Othello has now, and it's the embodiment of jealousy, the blood be spotted. Shakespeare is very clear, offering the decline of our tragic hero with his repetitive and simplistic language. More often than not, as you see from Act 3, Scene 3 onwards, it's important to flag for you that polysyllabic language disappears for Othello, and instead he becomes much more monosyllabic in his word choices. And this is very clearly stated in Act 5, Scene 2, when he says, it is the cause, it is the cause. This is his justification in murder, repeated as if we didn't get it the first time. And it is as muddled as his mind. It shows his conflicted state of mind. We wonder what the cause was, except jealousy. And his utterances when he says, put out the light, and then put out the light. It's simple, but it's also very simple as a symbol of how his hope is going. So our mighty warrior becomes a feeble murderer, killing the love of his life, all because of jealousy. What a dark and morbid thought, but one that grips us as audience members and definitely proves the poison that jealousy is to our souls. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?